And I went forward to the well deck on the starboard side, and I could see ice in the well deck. There's no sign of Iceberg then, because she'd passed us. And the lights were shining on the water from the portholes, and no sign of damage above waterline. And of course, what had happened, we'd slipped over the Iceberg. And although she was supposed to be unsinkable with a double bottom, the Iceberg had cut her from forward on the starboard side to the engine room.
Few tragedies in modern history have captured the world's imagination quite like the sinking of the RMS Titanic, when the unsinkable ship struck an iceberg on April 14, 1912, and went down in the icy waters of the North Atlantic. It became more than just a maritime disaster, it became legend. But with fame comes myth. Over time, stories surrounding the Titanic have blurred the lines between fact and fiction. Let's explore some of the most common misconceptions about the Titanic's sinking. Myth 1. The Titanic was widely advertised as unsinkable. One of the most enduring myths about the Titanic is that it was boldly proclaimed to be unsinkable before its maiden voyage. Popular retellings, including films and documentaries, often emphasize this claim as an example of human arrogance, an almost biblical foreshadowing of the disaster to come. The phrase has become so closely tied to the ship's story, it's difficult to imagine the Titanic without it. The reality, however, is more complicated. In 1911, before the ship was launched, the Shipbuilder magazine described the Titanic and her sister ship Olympic as being practically unsinkable because of their watertight compartments and advanced safety features. The White Star Line itself rarely used the term, and when it did appear, it was usually in passing, not in the grand advertising slogans people imagine today. In fact, much of the public didn't strongly associate the Titanic with the phrase until after the sinking, when newspapers, looking for a moral hook, seized on the idea of the unsinkable ship being destroyed by nature. So why does the myth endure? Because it serves as a neat cautionary tale. The concept of an unsinkable ship sinking provides a symbolic narrative about hubris, the dangers of overconfidence in technology, and the fragility of human achievement. Myth 2. The band played Nearer My God to Thee as the ship sank.
Did you see the ship sink?
I did. It sank very quickly. You could just see the lights going down and down.
Did you hear the music playing?
I did.
Almost till the end?
Till the end, I heard them play Nearer My God to Thee.
Nearer My God to Thee.
Gained traction largely through newspapers and survivor memoirs written after the fact, which often lean towards dramatization. In reality, the band likely played a range of music. Ultimately, the myth persists because it represents dignity and selflessness amid disaster. Myth 3. Third-class passengers were locked below decks. A recurring theme in Titanic lore is that its third-class passengers, mostly immigrants hoping for a new life in America, were deliberately locked below deck, while the first and second-class passengers were given priority access to lifeboats. Films like Titanic have dramatized this idea, showing desperate families trapped behind iron gates as crew members enforce class barriers even in the face of disaster. While it's true that class divisions aboard the Titanic were stark, and third-class passengers faced many obstacles in reaching the lifeboats, the idea that they were literally locked down is a myth. Maritime regulations at the time required ships to maintain physical separation between classes, primarily for immigration and health inspections. Gates and barriers did exist, but evidence suggests they were not deliberately kept shut during the evacuation to keep steerage passengers from escaping. Survivor testimony indicates that many third-class passengers simply struggled with a lack of clear communication, language barriers, and the confusing layout of the ship. Additionally, crew members were often overwhelmed and unprepared for such an emergency, which made the evacuation uneven and chaotic. In many cases, third-class passengers did not even know where to find the lifeboats, while first-class passengers were guided directly to them. The result was tragically lopsided survival rates. About 62% of first-class passengers survived, compared to just 25% of third class. Myth 4. Titanic's lookout couldn't spot the iceberg because they lacked binoculars.
Did you rescue anyone from the water?
Oh yes, we used to take dry ones from another boat, and they used to pick wet ones up then and put all the wet ones together in another boat so as that there wouldn't be.
Were there only women and children in your boat?
Oh yes, there was women. And one man, he had jumped in with a raincoat and a towel on his head.
Another popular belief is that the Titanic's lookouts, stationed in the crow's nest, were unable to see the iceberg in time because they didn't have access to binoculars. According to this story, the binoculars were locked away, and the key had been mistakenly taken ashore by an officer who was reassigned before the voyage. This detail has been repeated so often it feels like a smoking gun, a tiny oversight with catastrophic consequences. The truth is more complicated. While it's true the Titanic's lookouts did not have binoculars that night, maritime experts argue that binoculars would not have made much difference. Icebergs were often easier to spot with the naked eye, since binoculars narrowed one's field of vision and made it harder to scan the horizon quickly. In fact, the ship struck the iceberg at night, with calm seas and no moonlight, conditions that made detection extremely difficult, binoculars or not. The story of the missing key and misplaced binoculars likely survives because it offers a simple explanation for a complex disaster. People tend to look for small, preventable mistakes in the face of tragedy, as they provide a sense that the catastrophe could have been avoided. In reality, the iceberg was spotted as soon as it became visible, and the collision had more to do with the ship's speed, the weather conditions, and the limitations of early 20th century maritime technology than a missing pair of binoculars. But their testimonies were conflicting. The White Star Line and early investigators were eager to downplay the idea of the ship breaking apart, as it would suggest structural weakness in the design. As a result, the one-piece version of events became the accepted narrative. The truth didn't come to light until 1985, when Robert Ballard and his team discovered the wreck of the Titanic on the ocean floor. The ship had indeed split in two, with the bow and stern sections lying nearly 2,000 feet apart. This confirmed what many survivors had insisted at the time, but had been dismissed as unreliable, trauma-distorted memories. The myth of the Titanic sinking intact lingered for so long, partly because it was more palatable. An unbroken ship slipping silently into the ocean fit the tragic grandeur of the story, while the violent image of a vessel tearing itself apart was harder to reconcile with notions of elegance and majesty. Films like James Cameron's Titanic have since corrected this misconception, vividly depicting the ship breaking apart. Myth 6. Titanic's captain was drunk when the ship sank. Another enduring rumor paints Captain Edward Smith, the Titanic's commander, as being under the influence of alcohol on the night of the disaster. The claim has popped up in some popular retellings and persists in casual conversation, often as a way to personify human failure in the tragedy. After all, if the captain himself was negligent, it would provide a direct culprit to blame. In reality, there's no credible evidence to support this claim. Survivor accounts consistently describe Smith as calm and composed, even as the crisis unfolded. He was last seen helping with evacuation efforts, directing passengers, and ensuring lifeboats were launched. No testimonies from crew or passengers suggested he had been drinking that night, and the rumor appears to have arisen later, fueled by the human tendency to assign blame in times of catastrophe. Captain Smith's reputation before the Titanic was impeccable. He was known as the millionaire's captain for his popularity among wealthy travelers and his long, distinguished career. Now it's time to hear from you. Which of these myths was the most surprising? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below.